Okay, welcome to podcast number 5.
5, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the first time we've had an in-house guest.
I know, I'm excited for this. It's
I
good.
know. So normally we do our little intro, and then obviously we kind of hook up on the call with whoever our guest is, and there've been some far-fetched places so far.
They have been all over the world.
All over.
We're lucky to have Chris here, though.
Yeah, Chris Voshall from Mizuno.
I'm happy to crash your party.
Thank
So
you.
come
It's
to
awesome.
you guys, right?
This is great. Yeah, this is so good.
We are. I think we're the luckiest outlet out there that we get access to yourself. When new product comes out, and it is a real treat for us and the viewers, and so we really appreciate you coming.
This is the third time. Is it the third time you've come?
Third or fourth?
It's at
Maybe
least
third.
3. We saw you in the summer.
We did the first. You came for the woods,
Yep.
and you came for the new irons, and you're here again. So
maybe it is the third time. Yeah,
it's good. When Ian said you were coming, I was like, good. Like, sounds good to me.
It's always a fun trip. Just you guys are so knowledgeable in everything you talk about. So I love because I can talk as techie as I want, and I don't get chastised for that. So I think that's a good thing. So no, I always love being here.
Well, Eve, just looking at the feedback after your videos, and we say to each other all the time, you can say something. And 5 other, employees from an OEM could say the same thing. You're the only one who gets away with it on our channel.
Yeah, it's true.
Isn't that true? I mean, anytime,
I wonder why that is.
I mean, it's just authenticity. Is what it is.
Okay.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah, I think people can tell you're sincere and enthusiastic about it. And obviously, you're very good at explaining everything, but there's definitely an intangible thing to the way that you're passionate about it, that the comments are always very positive. Like, people are legitimately excited for Chris to come.
Oh, absolutely.
And when we have, it's not to anyone's fault. I mean, we have people from other companies do sort of the technical spiel for new products. It's not that they've done a bad job. I just don't think people, I don't know, just don't connect with them. And most people are positive, but it's usually like, okay, well, that was fine, but
well,
maybe don't do it again. But
I definitely appreciate that. I mean, I'm truly pretty blessed in my position where I absolutely love talking golf equipment.
Yeah.
So it's something that hopefully some of that passion comes out. And what's funny is, maybe some of the good is because of some of the bad. I remember at one point, as an engineer, I remember working on one product, trying to do these changes, and it was only a subtle change. And I remember someone saying, "Wow, that's not how an engineer is supposed to think about that. Like, you're a terrible engineer," which I kind of took as an insult at the time. But ultimately, hopefully, I'm trying to. What I aim to do was try to bring as much technical knowledge as possible, but then try to make it as understandable as possible. And hopefully that's where some of the authenticity comes from, because as an engineer, I question everything. So if I don't believe it myself, then how's anyone else going to believe it? So I'm always trying to say, here's what we're trying to do, here's why we're trying to do it, and here's how we did it. So try to just tell a story along with, as opposed to just, hey, it has this in it. I want to tell why it has this in it. I want to tell why we did what we did.
It's pretty unique for you to be in a position where you spent so much time actually designing and engineering clubs, and then now you're moving probably more into a customer-facing role, you'd say, or a public-facing role. Usually that person that we talk to, again, is very knowledgeable, but I don't think they're the ones that actually were involved designing it, or maybe not to the same degree. They're usually kind of being presented by that team and then this team, so there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect there, and that's probably why it's a little bit more genuine.
Well, that's one of the things I appreciate about Mizuno is we are lean. We're a pretty small crew. We've got an engineering team in Japan, engineering team in the States, but ultimately, if you're in a position in Mizuno and you say, hey, I think we could do better at this, you have that opportunity to say, okay, go do that. As opposed to a lot of the other companies, which I feel like are a lot, bigger business, if you will, where, it's the engineering team is very siloed, the marketing team is very siloed, the testing team is very siloed. I feel like within Mizuno, I saw an opportunity of, I'm coming from the engineering side, but I saw that we struggle on our messaging outside. So how can I help on that? So let me take ownership over that and let me try to do that. And ultimately, sadly, it led me out of engineering, but at the same time, it allows an engineer to be able to tell our story, which I think speaks well for us.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it fits the brand very well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think it really does. Let's dive into the origin story. I know a little bit about it, but how did you end up at Mizuno, and kind of what was the lead into you taking the role?
It's actually kind of a funny story where I'll go way back first. Is that I was always a golf club junkie. I remember my dad and I used to go to the golf shop every Saturday morning. We'd go to McDonald's for breakfast and then go mess around at the golf shop before going to the driving range. So I remember going back and looking at MP14s, MP29s, holding them, looking at them. I would always just had a fascination with clubs. Ultimately, then that I was a math guy, science guy. It led me to engineering. Graduated from school with a degree in engineering and had no clue what I wanted to do with it or what I could do with it. So this was back in the day. I'm going to go back to 2014. Monster.com was still a thing, where you had a job hiring site, and I found on there a club engineer for Mizuno Golf.
Really?
And I was like, this is unbelievable. This is absolutely what I want to do. So I applied to it. In typical kid coming out of school applying for a job, it requires 10 years experience, 10 years of this, blah, blah, blah. I have none of that.
Yeah.
Don't care. I put my resume in anyway and wrote a big letter about why I'm the right guy for this job and expected to hear nothing back ever. Luckily, I actually did hear back, but I heard back, hey, you're grossly underqualified for that.
Really?
But we're opening a testing center in Atlanta. And that was when, in 2004, that fall, we opened up our R&D center, where we've always had one in Japan, but we've never had one in the States, where we had a robotic golfer, all the measuring equipment, the TrackMan, which we bought soon after I started there. I think it was a what was it called? A Vector at the time was what we had. So we had all of that stuff there, and I basically was offered, are you interested in interviewing to come and run that? So I was like, absolutely, jumped at the idea and came in as a testing engineer. So my job was buying golf clubs, going to the store where I would always go and basically buy one of everything off the rack, bring it in-house, cut it up, dice it up, do whatever I could, measure everything, and just try to understand what our competitors were doing. So then I would measure all that, understand it, and then I would put together all of our testing, whether it's with our competitor clubs or with anything we're developing. So that's a great way to get a basic knowledge of what makes a club tick and what makes it work. So I was in that position for a couple of years, and during that whole time, I was, again, we're a small team, I was over all the club engineers' shoulders, like, what are you doing now? What are you working on? What are you working on? And just ultimately started learning the club engineering side from that. So my boss for the last number of years, a guy named David Llewellyn, huge the contributions to the industry for a name that if you're deep in the inside, but it's not a commonly known name. He's probably one of the first ones in the industry to design a golf club in 3D. So he designed the MP33s, the 37s, some very MP30s, very iconic sets of golf clubs. And he was very instrumental in the change of Mizuno going from working with a craftsman and literally just grinding plastic molds to actually designing in 3D. So he's the one who developed a ton of that, and I learned a ton from him. So he still heads up our R&D department, actually over golf and baseball. So he's the reason a lot of our products have been so good over the years, but my background came from that.
Interesting. No, that's cool to hear, because I think most people kind of, I think, are always curious how people end up in these roles.
For sure they are.
And to hear that, you're just first and foremost, and the foundation of the whole thing, you were just a golf techie, golf geek, just loved the gear, just a gearhead.
Absolutely. It's so funny how people are so passionate about this game. Why a company would hire someone who's not an absolute nut about the game. So that's why I feel very fortunate, and I think my whole team, everybody who's within Mizuno is the same way, and it feels more and more like the whole industry is like that now. For a while, it felt like it wasn't. It was more business, and now it feels like it's just golfers.
Really? Interesting that it's had kind of that, I guess, that ebb and flow to where it became too businessy. Now they found probably the key to the success is people that actually just fundamentally just love playing golf.
I think so. I think so.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, and internally, from your gut instinct, what separates Mizuno from other companies?
What I love about us is that we are engineering and science first. It's the fact that, if I'm the main marketing guy from Mizuno USA, I come from an engineering side. So it's basically, the whole time I was in R&D, the idea of what are we going to sell next year didn't come from, okay, marketing says we need this. It came from engineering said, hey, we can make this. So it's a little bit of I'm sure there's some other companies out there, but I feel like we're more so that than others, where it's like we're going to figure out what our story is after we know what the product is. Yeah. So it's the engineers lead the way, which is really cool. And I think Mizuno has a long history of that, not only in golf, but also in other sports, and in baseball and running shoes and a lot of different things. We've been an engineering first company for a long time. And that goes to not just what the product does, what the technologies are, but what materials we use, what processes we use. It's amazing how many meetings we'll have with a factory to say, okay, the factory says there are these limitations. Okay, how can we work with you to work around those limitations, whether it's a material, a process, or a design thing from our end. So to me, our big differentiator is engineering first.
That makes a ton of sense to me. And I think about my experience with Mizuno, and I probably learned more about materials from Mizuno than any other company. Get more awareness of what's happening with materials, whether it's infusing boron into the mix, with the JPX line, whether it's chromoly, with all these sorts of things. I feel like, every time we talk and we have these discussions about new products, there's a new material to speak about. Sometimes there's more of the messages in, well, it does this, well, it does that, and kind of like, they're trying to sell the the performance. And back to just exactly what you were saying there, it's, the engineering side of it. We know more about the ingredients of your product than any other product. That
actually didn't, like, golf I think used to be more about materials at one point when wood stopped being a component for actual heads of drivers, let's say. It was more about the type of steel. And then it does seem like it's more to do with shapes and adjustability. And then what you were talking about, I think we were talking golf balls a few weeks ago, actually while we were in California. And when you're going on about graphene and things like that, like the biggest leaps are usually because a new material has become whatever the case may be. Like it can be affordably produced now, or wasn't available, someone couldn't develop it, and now it has. I guess like titanium would have been a huge jump. Steel was a huge jump.
Well, and I think that's a differentiator from, is a company looking at what the factory offers, or is a company looking at what can I take to a factory? Because ultimately, golf is, you hate to say it, but kind of an incestuous industry where there's a lot of engineering, but very few are developing, or actually, I shouldn't say developing, but actually manufacturing their own things. So, if you go to, call it Japan, China, Korea, Taiwan, wherever you are, Thailand, where heads are being manufactured, it's not uncommon to see company X going down one line, company Y going down another line.
Really?
So if you're a company who goes to a factory and says, I want to make this, what materials are available, what processes are available, then you're no better than the one on the line next to you. It's just, how did you use those materials?
Interesting.
And I think a little bit of what makes us different is we'll instead of going and saying, okay, what's available, we'll say, we'll work with our metallurgists, work with the different factories, work with some outside metal companies and say, these are the handcuffs, how can we overcome these? And then how can we work with a factory to make these real life? So I think it's a step further than just saying, what can a company do? It's what can we bring to your company to help you do this? And if you speak to basically like the forging side of the world, we talked about the boron, the infused boron in our 1025E. That's something where we worked very closely with Chuo Koyo, our forging factory, to say, we can only go so thin on a forging. Why is that? And then what can we do looking outside of what, Chuo has their limitations. Okay, here's where we're going to buy our metal. What can we get from that side that can help us overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously Mizuno as a company that has some serious lineage and heritage, and there's some real history behind the forgings and the evolution of the product. It must be at times, a challenge to move with the times, but retain that authenticity to the heritage and what it was all about at the start.
You're absolutely right about that. I mean, I remember the first time I was tasked with, okay, you get to design an MP set of golf clubs, and just the heritage and what that means to have something that you're working on have that emblem on it and have the Mizuno name. There's expectations when Mizuno launches a forged MP golf club. It has to look this way, it has to feel that way, it has to perform this way, it has to be accepted on tour, like all these other things. And I'm just a young engineer, like trying to figure out how, like, why do I get to do this? But there is a lineage of not just the history of the stuff we put out, but a whole group of people on the back end who are making sure that everything comes out, lives up to the Mizuno name.
Right.
So when I was a young engineer, I've got a co-engineer working behind me, and then I've got people on the manufacturing side behind them, making sure that nothing's going to trip up.
Yeah.
So you've got a parachute behind you, and ultimately you eventually get to the point where you're trusted to the point where you can do your own. But to your point about how do you continue to evolve that, that's always a tricky one. And one of my favorite quotes, and I might get the wording slightly wrong, but there was a guy, Masao Nagai. So Nagai-san started at Mizuno in Japan when he was, I think, 22 years old, and he ended up retiring from Japan at 60 years old, and he was the original guy who hired me. And we were discussing MP golf clubs one day, and he said, the trick with designing a golf club is to not get caught up in the history. He goes, you have to somewhat offend somebody with some element of the design every time. Otherwise, it's just boring. So, and I thought that was a really interesting thing, because especially on the MP side, again, we're so caught up with the history of it has to be clean, it has to be simple, it can't be anything. You got to offend someone just a little bit to give you a reason to be interested in it. So I thought that was a really cool insight that, I think the whole R&D team still thinks about every time we're working on a new golf club.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? That's how the product's going to evolve. You're going to take something that at one point was the best that you could come up with and move it on, which is basically saying that the previous one wasn't as good as it could be because this one's better. So that makes a ton of sense.
And it also stops you from producing the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely.
With only cosmetic. I guess it would just be cosmetic at that point. If you really can't change anything, the internal sort of guts of the design, then you're basically just kind of stamping something new. And
that's where if you look at like a muscle back is the perfect one where you can say, why do I need a new muscle back every 2 years? Every new muscle back that we've had has something different and something new in it. It's not like we've just done a new muscle back. So like with MP18 was our introduction of GrainFlow Forge HD. With MP20, we brought the copper underlay to it. Like each time we're working on what is the next thing that makes it a little bit different and a little bit unique that at some point could have been taboo in the past.
And do you have to look at sort of like a certain number of years designs to say you need to compare this year's MP20 to, does it need to be 10 years ago for someone to go, whoa, those are really different clubs? Because they sort of seem like they flow, like the design advancement sort of flows from year to year, not so much a stark difference. Yeah,
we're always trying to make small steps, but ultimately you're going to see the bigger jumps the further you look back. But we're always trying to say, like, for example, if you look at the MP18 versus the MP20 versus, something before it, you'll see a different shape, and with each shape we're trying to do something a little bit different in terms of the weighting. So in terms of where the muscle pad lives, or if there's a kick down on the toe, if there's not, if it's a straight line. And then that's where you get some differentiation too between like an MP and a JPX. Like the 919 Tour is a completely different golf club aesthetically and weighting wise than an MP18 SC. But ultimately those two golf clubs, they're both GrainFlow Forge, they're both 1025E Pure Select, they're both shallow cavity, players irons, very similar head length, but the weighting and something we did different separates those two. So we're always trying to look at what we've done, but then change it. Like you have to change it, you have to be going for something tangible.
No, I think I like all that. That's really cool. What do you think makes Mizuno sort of fans or sort of advocates? What makes them so?
This is a good question.
I don't really care.
They're fanatics.
Mizuno
fanatic, for sure.
They only have that feeling for your brand. How do you achieve that?
It's a great question.
It is a great question, and I think it comes back to the fact that everything is measurably better. Like we're not just spitting out a new product to spit out a new product. We're not spitting out a product with a claim that it's going to do something crazy. Like even as much as woods are getting better year after year after year, we're not going to claim you're going to get 100 yards more. Like it's because at every point, I haven't seen a technology since I've started where, okay, this is old way could never work again. Like you're always getting better, but each improvement is subtle.
Right.
So with Mizuno, we're always looking for those subtle improvements, and we're always tweaking them to make things a little bit better. Obviously, we're trying to look at not just the distance you get out of clubs, we're looking at the forgiveness, the consistency, how you can fit them, and then ultimately the feel, I think, is what brings a lot of people into that Mizuno world where they really get locked in, because we have a patented difference. It's a material difference and a process difference, and also an engineering difference in terms of how we measure the head in the CAD world, and how we simulate the vibration and understand that, so how it's going to sound audibly. There's a lot of things that we do on the back end that, if you just look at a golf club, you don't realize this is something different. So the fact that we have fanatics is awesome, and we're just trying to keep them pleased.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
we're doing the same thing.
I know, so to be honest, we have a hard time.
We're doing the same thing. I mean, if we miss a beat and Mizuno doesn't show up in one of our tests,
it's the best. It's so fun. My favorite was recently was like a best irons thing. And we were going. I mean, it was very fair as far as I'm concerned. It was stuff that Ian and the fitters have really found to be great performing for like the last 14 months. We're not talking about like what's good from this summer, the full year. And tons of comments going like, where's MP20? Where's MP20? Where's MP20? And I'm just like, well, we've had it for 3 months.
We've had it since the fall.
And we keep saying, and a couple times like regulars of ours, I'll kind of joke with them, wait for the 2020 list. Probably be on there, because I wouldn't be surprised, obviously. But it's kind of the loyalty. I think that's probably another term for it. The brand loyalty to Mizuno. I think they just feel like they're just.
Exactly what it is.
It's just like that's the most pure golf club for them, and the most kind of the most pure experience.
Well, and what I love is I don't feel like we are, as much as we're one of the. I mean, I consider us one of the major OEMs. So in terms of market share and everything. We still kind of sneak under the radar on a lot of things. Like we're not in your face every time you're watching TV. We're not in your face every time you're here. We don't go out and pay 1 million tour players just to say that we have the best stuff. Like we're very run like a small company that produces great stuff. So I hope that the fans, the fanatics, I should say, almost feel like they're in the know, and it's like they're onto something that the rest of the industry doesn't realize. And that's kind of the culture we try to cultivate. Is even though we're a major OEM, we feel like we don't act like a major OEM. We act like we're a beginner. We act like we're trying to challenge what's going on. So
these people are really they're rooting for you in that sense. They feel more a part of the process.
Right.
One thing I can say about Mizuno and kind of having obviously had Mizuno account for a long time now is that Mizuno is a great partner. I don't know if that's ever an internal conversation. Look at you're sitting here with us today.
Right.
I mean, how better, to represent that partnership than having access to someone like yourself. And I look at other outlets, and it's not just us. I mean, you'll go and sit with Nick at Club Champion. You're going, the guys in the UK will do stuff. They'll do days with Al and other YouTube outlets, and you guys are so accessible, and you're always kind of wanting to work with people who are out there kind of spreading the word, and I just think that leads to great partnership.
Well, I think that's something that it's a conscious effort. We want to identify the people who understand who we are, understand why we do things. It's not all about units. It's not all about margin. It's about getting people to perform the best and talking to the passionate people. So I think we try to do a very good job of pointing those people out or identifying those people. I know, I came to you guys a couple of years ago, and I hopefully I was one of the first, but I don't.
You were 100% the first.
Which is good, because we had been following you, and again, I talk about I'm a golf junkie. I'm following YouTube, I'm following Twitter, Instagram, what people are doing, and you guys were doing something different. You guys were doing something cool. So I want to be a part of that. I want you guys to understand who we are, and I want to understand who you are. So our goal is never just to spit product down your throat. Our goal is to always just work with the most influential people and work with the guys who understand the technology and understand why our golf club might be different and understand why it should go in somebody's hand. Because we're not always the most asked for golf club if a random person comes in from the street. That's why we want to make sure that we're speaking to the right people, and we want to be a good partner. We want to be an open book because We feel like we are very honest and truthful in everything we do and how we make everything. So we try to be a good partner. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, no, it's very evident, you know, and even just looking at the landscape is not even how I feel internally. It's just observing, you know, the golf community and how often I see, you know, sort of, you know, Mizuno partnering with outlets to help them and help, you know, their communities, and we were so fortunate. I mean, with obviously the 50K giveaway and
which was awesome.
I've never seen a response to anything like that.
No.
I mean, we were excited, which is I hope gave people an indication of how good that contest was. Like when we did it, we're like, this is a crazy prize. And actually, just what was it, a few weeks ago? You showed me, Michael sent you a picture of all his stuff showed up.
Yep.
Nice.
And I looked at that and I went like that
there's
is
bags
so
and
good.
brollies and hats and everything.
He must have been like over the moon with that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into sort of the next thing I want to talk to you about, because obviously it'll always be irons, right? Mizuno will always be an iron company. But looking at it top to bottom now, you know, really from the wood line and how competitive that is down to the golf ball and kind of how unique that is, you know, that is a lot of kind of thought going into everything now, not just the iron.
You know, we got, for a little while, I would say we got focused to a fault on irons, where, you know, we've never been, and we've never claimed to be, we're aiming to be the #1 share driver. That's not our goal. But what we're always trying to do is put out the best product available. So, you know, when we were really almost too focused on irons, it turned into a conversation internally, just to air some dirty laundry internally. It's almost like we would, okay, we're going to sell X number of pieces. It doesn't matter if those pieces are $5.99 or $2.99 or $3.99. We're going to buy and we're going to sell out. That was the typical pattern of Mizuno woods. So you'd see us bring them in, we'd launch them with the irons, and then what would happen is we'd start selling them in, we'd start shipping them probably in November, and then by early April we'd be sold out. Very predictable, very easy business to do. But it's not a business that's going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to expose you or continue to give you more exposure. So we fell into the trap of almost like, okay, if the hot price point now is $299, we're going to go after a $299 driver. And then from the R&D side, that became very frustrating because a $299 driver, you only have X number of dollars to put towards head cost or whatever. So the product suffered a little bit just because of how we bought clubs. When I say bought from our factory and bought and manufactured. A couple years ago, we tried to make a shift on that of, okay, if we're only going to sell this number, why don't we sell the best one we can? So starting with the JPX 850 was a wood product where it had a ton of adjustability, crazy low spin. It was probably one of the first super low spin drivers that came out. And that was a golf club that, again, we brought in and we sold more than we thought we were going to, sold out right away. And ultimately, that started us on a better trend of making more predictable, more clubs that you want to be aspiring to play, like our irons. And then almost to circle back fully, again, it got to the conversation of, okay, we're only going to sell so many. So on some of the JPX 900, on the ST GT 180, they were a bright blue. Let's brand it as much as possible since we're only going to sell so many. But then that turns into, okay, you're only speaking to a very limited part of the market. So one of the big pushes we're trying to do now is we want to be accessible, we want it to be something that you will be proud of through the bag. A guy who looks down and demands a pure, simple, true Mizuno blade is probably not a guy who wants a bright, flashy blue driver. So that's where you've seen our drivers actually cosmetically circle back to be almost more MP, if you will. But then we've put a ton of technology into it. We've put more time and investment and resources. So we're getting golf clubs that you're proud of from top to bottom, and we feel that would perform at any level, and you're starting to see the acceptance on the tour. Golf ball's another thing like that as well. We were selling it in Europe, we were selling it in Japan, but we hadn't put the time and investment in to understand the US market and the Canada market and just the North America side, what it takes to be successful there, and now we're starting to learn that. So ultimately, it's just, if we have a product that we feel is competitive within the market, let's go for it.
That's pretty cool. Just one thing that came up while you were saying that. The term, like, I think I've heard this before, but not just from you. Like, Mizunos are often like an aspirational product. People kind of aspire to be able to play a Mizuno club. Do you guys struggle with that in terms of producing forgiving clubs? Because I know you have plenty of irons that you can play at any handicap. Do you still get people going like, oh, I can't play with the Mizuno because of that?
Absolutely, and that's one of the trickiest things. Is it's almost like if you picture you're at a random golf shop somewhere, guy walks in, hey, I'm a really good player. The retailer almost naturally walks them to us and Titleist. Yeah. Someone walks in and says, I'm a 20 handicap. They walk them towards Ping, Callaway, TaylorMade. So it's very much it's a reputation that's hard to break. What surprises a lot of people is the fact that we sell 70% of our golf clubs are JPX, not MP.
Is that right?
So the market is so much bigger, and what we're trying to do is bring some of the aspiration of MP to that JPX player. So if you look at our clubs, how they've grown cosmetically and feel-wise and everything over the last number of years, we went from the game improvement market used to be very big, clunky, bright colored badges, and all that stuff. If you look at our clubs right now, our 919 Hot Metal, our Hot Metal Pro, our Forge, our JPX Tour, there's no color on any of them.
That's a really good point.
We almost stripped everything back. We almost made those try to look like blades. So we wanted to speak to the aspirational part of the look in the bag, but then build the forgiveness into it. And that's where we always joke is the number one thing we want to do is drive someone to a fitter. Because if you go in saying, I want this club, you're almost stuck right there because you can only perform as well as that club will perform for you. So if we can tie that aspirational look to our entire brand and then get you to a fitter, it's you guys' job to put you into the one that performs best for you.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what's kind of, you know, it's hard to obviously talk too much about the future and but how do you guys see the kind of the next evolution, the next wave, the next sort of where the opportunities lie?
So for us, we think the opportunities lie on the metalwood side, the wedges side, the golf ball side. We think with growth in metalwoods comes growth in irons. The market has proven that. We're almost the exception of somebody who can be very strong in irons and struggle in metalwoods. If you look at golf through the years, that's not been the case. We're very much one of the exceptions that does that.
Most people are strong in woods and then they get better at irons.
And irons pull along with it. So if you watch a company spike in woods, their irons will spike right behind it. Really? It's almost, you can almost set your watch to it.
Is that because there's more iron, like it's a larger segment of someone's bag, or it's a bigger single purchase?
I think it's because there's more churn on the wood side. It's if I got this wood, I really like this wood, okay, it was performing for me, let me look at that company's irons. So to be able to grow on that side, I think that's what will really unleash us to be a great all-around brand.
Yeah. It's funny because we were just chatting about with one of the OEMs, or one of the shaft OEMs, about how they're going to get into the iron space. And they've been dominating the wood space quite heavily, especially on tour, and talking about how their dominance in that section is going to lead to a big spike in business if they can start to sell irons and wedges, because you know, 3 shafts become 13 shafts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very quickly. So if you can get the iron market and get that kind of brand loyalty, like we were talking about, and get people to buy irons and wedges with the shafts in them. That's a big spike in business.
It is, for
so that's interesting to look at it kind of that way, and how the driver drives the market.
The driver's the sexy golf club. There's no doubt about it. People talk about it. People see pictures of someone holding it at the finish. I mean, it's true. If you can drive that, you can drive other parts of the business.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you guys probably have a little advantage in people being very prepared to try the wood, because they've always been prepared to try the iron.
Right.
So they've been very, always, I get people in here all the time who say, I've always wanted to be fit to Mizuno. I've always wanted to be able to play Mizuno.
Right.
And now they have the best opportunity they've ever had, because like you say, JPX is so playable, so forgiving, it's so hot, it's everything it needs to be in the modern market. And it kind of, there's no barrier to using a Mizuno club now.
Right. Well, and that's where we want to continue to try to push that. And again, it's almost get more accessibility to our woods too. So if someone wants to try it, there's pockets of areas where, I can't find a Mizuno wood. But we're trying to expand that and be, you don't want to say more mass market, but be more available, so be more fittable. And then by working with people like you guys who truly do fit, that's where a club really will perform, and that's where you'll start to see the benefits of that.
Talk to me a little bit about tour, and obviously heritage, Faldo, you know, his input on the irons. You know, right now probably one of your most trusted advisors on the iron design and sort of performance would be Luke Donald, I'm sure, and you know how he sees the product performing. Tell me a little bit about that.
Working with the tour it's really cool. It's such a privilege to be able to do, to understand what they're looking for, and there's such a wide variety. There's the Faldo on one end who, if one line is a fraction of a millimeter off, this set is out. Yeah. But you appreciate that. I mean, that goes to a lot of the precision that we try to build into everything. I think he was the perfect guy to speak to what Mizuno does, where every last millimeter matters. So working with him over the last couple of years was really cool to see how he looked at golf clubs. Luke, it's all about feel, it's all about turf interaction. That's what he really wants to understand. It has to feel right, it has to enter the turf cleanly, it has to exit the turf cleanly. So that comes with the way the club vibrates. So some of the weighting on that will play into that. And then the enter and exiting the turf comes to the sole design. So really dialing in that sole design. And then you speak with some other players like a Keith Mitchell. He's one of those guys who, if it works, it works, and he doesn't overthink it. You know, there's some guys who are like that, and some guys who are the complete opposite. You know, I worked with Charles Howell for a number of years, and he was a fun one just because he's Faldo-like, where he wants to analyze every little bit. If this spin rate is 5 RPM off, I want to understand why and what's going on. So it's cool to get to work with all those guys, but we try to bring their feedback into everything we do, and that's not just a blade. We try to bring their feedback into the 919 Forge, the Hot Metal Pro even. I mean, we saw Paul Casey was one guy. He's got a Hot Metal Pro long irons in his bag, which he hit over the green and made a funny reaction.
Just thinking of that. He's looking at it like,
that's the wrong one.
Do you know the full story behind that with the sole number?
Yeah, it was a stamp or something like that.
Because he plays his lofts jacked up. He had the wrong sole number. It was pretty funny.
So he just pulled the wrong club basically because of the lofts.
Johnny Long Socks pulled the wrong club.
As soon as he hit it, he knew like instantly. As soon as he got off the face, he's like, that's gone.
But what's cool is that even a golf club like the Hot Metal Pro has worked its way into, that's a top 15 player in the world, worked its way into his bag.
That's true,
So that's something that we're trying to verify with those guys at every single level. There's no detail too big or too small for the tour guys, just because their insight is different than what you or I might get out of a golf club.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Anything else, Matty?
Probably go on all day, couldn't we?
I know.
Just going to ask you. When it comes to tour players, the only thing I think people ask quite often is it's like, I don't think all companies do it to the same degree, but it seems like sort of the tour-driven thing is sort of always the top-down, I guess, trickle of how information and design happens. Some people will say, why does a tour player's input matter to me? Because I'm a 23 handicap or something. And that guy swings nothing like me, plays nothing like me. How do you sort of balance what Keith Mitchell tells you, yet you're making a JPX Hot Metal? I know some players that use them on tour, but mostly it's not. It's not for him, right? It's for someone that's vastly different skill level.
You're exactly right, and that's where building a golf club to be custom fit means so much. So, for example, a golf club that Keith Mitchell hit at 180 miles an hour ball speed, and how does that translate into a golf club that someone who's bringing 115 miles an hour or 125 mile an hour ball speed? World's difference there, but that's where a design has to be flexible enough that through the right shaft, through the right weighting, through the right loft, through any adjustment you can make, should be able to fit that person from top to bottom.
Right.
So we rely very heavily on them, but at the same time, we understand that this is built up to them. They're looking for a certain aspect of playability out of it, where the average guy might be looking for something different out of it. So we have to work. You have to work very closely with them, but then you have to understand how each version of it's going to change if I change the shaft, if I change this loft. I mean, chromoly is a perfect example of a material that we brought to market because we knew that we wanted to be able to get a very hot-faced iron that players could use as a long iron, but ultimately the drawback of a hot face iron typically is it's not very bendable, custom fittable. And that's where the chromoly is a cool combination of malleability on the hosel, but still very thin and hot on the face. So you can get their feedback on feel, and feel is one of those things that they're so good at.
Yeah.
So good at understanding of, well, that felt hot, well, that felt soft, well, that felt this, that felt that. Feel can almost translate to a average guy a lot more than they would think it could.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, definitely agree with that.
I think a good example of that product design and how it translates from a tour player to an average golfer was Mike's fit.
Yeah.
Remember Mike's fit, the Mizuno winner? So he came in and it was turf interaction was his big issue.
Yep.
Any kind of anything that was slightly wider, and we probably started in some JPX product, and we ultimately ended up in the blade, and he's a 8-9 handicapper, nice player, but it was all turf interactions. So ball speed and consistency of kind of launch conditions was all generated through better contact and better turf interaction.
Yeah.
And that's where someone like Luke, who demands that, we can then utilize that exact same thing to give it to somebody who's struggling in that department.
That's true.
And how it kind of flows through the skill levels.
Yeah.
And I think one of the funny things about tour players is everybody says, I don't care if tour players play it. Everybody says that.
Yeah.
But then everybody totally contradicts themselves if something isn't played on tour.
Yeah, that's so true.
So it's all to us, it's a validation.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily, okay, we're going to design it for them, but we need these guys to confirm that our designs work. And that's where, we saw it on our drivers for a while. When our drivers weren't played on tour, hey, I don't care what these people play. Oh, but it's not played on tour. It was almost, it'll hold it against you.
Yeah.
So it's a validation or a confirmation of design for a lot of things for us.
Yeah,
well, we get that every day in the Bay these days. The way the golf ball flies, the way especially irons are being designed, and what people say is, I'm not here for distance. You're okay, no worries. and then literally within 10, 15 minutes, but it's not going further.
There you go.
It's exactly the same thing.
I don't need any more distance, but I need some distance.
Yeah.
I'm actually guilty of that too. Remember, I always say to you, like, oh, I like this driver. It kind of goes as straight as mine. And then by the end of the session, I'm swinging as hard as I can so that it will still go the same distance. You're just like, but everyone does it. So true. Yeah. That's a really good way of explaining it, though. I think validation is the word. It's not so much it's not so much designed for them, it's just validated by them, which makes a lot of sense.
Right.
No, that's cool.
I like that.
Excellent. What about what were your thoughts on President's Cup?
That was a fun one to watch. It really was. So, I'm a huge Tiger fan, so watching him play great that's awesome. And how good he played is just, it gets me excited for next year, what he might do.
That was a big takeaway from it as well, yeah, I agree.
I always get this lingering feeling now when I see him playing well at this time of year, like, oh, I wish it was April.
Right, exactly.
When he's playing this well, I'm like, I just don't know if he can kind of stay healthy for the next 6 months till Augusta rolls around, or 4 months till Augusta rolls
not
around.
even just Augusta, like his actual schedule start. It's not for quite some time. He not going to Hawaii, that's at least 2 events.
Right.
And then he's usually like a Torrey Pines
Torrey
kind of
Pines,
start.
he normally opens up, and then he'll do Riviera with his foundation.
It's very sparse, and I hope if he's this sharp, it would be. I like watching those events. I just hate when there's all the hype for it. And he's rusty. Like how can you not be? You've been off for 2 months.
Yeah, exactly. But there's so many young players playing great right now too. So it's fun to watch. So I really enjoyed all of it.
Yeah, it was good.
I don't know if I can think back to a period. Maybe the Haney. Maybe a period of the Haney era in the kind of maybe 2007-8 when he was winning at a clip. I think it was 43% or something like that. I don't know if I've seen all facets of his game as good as they are right now, though.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And it's one interesting little thing that for me that tells me how Tiger feels is the way he sets his driver up. So the way he sets the weights in his driver for draw tells me how he's feeling about his golf swing. So if he's comfortable moving it right to left and encouraging it to move right to left, that tells me what he's thinking about his swing and the positions he gets it into. Because
he's not guarding against.
Exactly. Because he would guard against, he was going for a while going down the left wing, trying to eliminate anything right to left and just trying to play something that was almost a block back into the fairway.
That was some of his, probably his, relative to him, some of his worst golf was being scared of hitting it left.
Yeah.
And
very erratic when he was doing that.
It wasn't steady at all. And it was almost like I need to hit a fade into fade, but he wasn't really hitting it consistently. Now you're right. He's shaping draws and fades, which means the confidence has to be there. You can't shape it both ways unless you're feeling it.
Well, and he's kind of made the concession, the distance concession
Mm-hmm.
now by going 1 degree more in loft and kind of playing the golf ball he plays, knowing that it's for maximum control. And that video we done when we were doing Rory's launch conditions and Tiger's launch conditions and how they kind of flight the ball so differently. And both at kind of elite speed. Tiger still, I saw a couple of drives, he was still kind of cruising at 173, 174 ball speed last week.
Right?
That's
plenty.
awesome.
But he doesn't live there. A lot of times he was being clocked at like 165. Right on tour average and that sort of thing.
Smooth ones that he hits.
Just smoothing it, but finding a ton of fairways. I think he led the field in fairways hit of the hero. Things like that are just real signs that his game is in tip-top shape. His wedge game looks unbelievable right now.
Well, you put Tiger in the fairway, and he's the best iron
player
player out there. So it's, you think back to Hoylake,
I know. That was incredible.
Put him in the fairway, and he's going to beat you. And if he can keep that confidence going like that, then there's no telling what he can do.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Well, I mean, before we kind of wrap up, we can't go through talking about tour and not talk about Brooks and obviously that sort of story and kind of his irons and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about how that internally how that evolved.
The story of how that evolved was, to me, one of the coolest stories that I know of equipment-wise. And I'm fortunate enough to have been a part of it. Was, if we'll go back, I'm going to get the years wrong. Let's say it was 2015 or something, when it was Justin Thomas and Brooks were both up on their Titleist deals.
Right.
So one of them was going to go. We knew that. And then at the same time, this was right when we were about to launch our JPX 900 line. And we had always had the discussion of, we sell a ton of JPXs, but we only play our tour players to play MPs. So there's this disconnect there of, we're putting all of our money and the bulk of our advertising and promotion dollars towards marketing the product that only speaks to 3% of the market. So is there a way to design a golf club that lives in the JPX line, that speaks to the rest of the JPX line, that still speaks to the tour? So one of the things we tried to do was we tried to say, let's target a JPX player. If you look at Luke Donald, he is the epitome of an MP player. The way he dresses, the way he carries himself, the way he holds his finish, everything is the epitome of MP. We looked at someone like Brooks Koepka as the epitome of JPX, the modern player. He mashes it, swings hard, walks confident, dresses sharp, like just everything about him spoke to that. So the funny thing is, we literally said, let's try to design a golf club that Brooks would like. So that's where the JPX 900 Tour came from. We looked at what he had played with Titleist, looked at what he has played with Nike, look at all the different types of golf clubs he had played and how he carried himself, and tried to design an iron that we thought would work for him. So we did that. Ultimately, he signed with Nike, and then he started playing Nike clubs. But then when the Nike contract, or when the Nike hard goods went away, he was open to play whatever he wanted. So he tested the field. He tried everything. He went to every OEM, said, I want to try these, I want to try these, I want to try these. He came to us, and one of the clubs he picked out was the 900 Tour. And ultimately, we had no idea if he was going to play him or not. We just built him a set, and then he showed up on the West Coast with them. And that was like, it was so cool how it came full circle of, like, we're literally designing this club for him. He has no idea we designed this club for him.
I was going to say, when did he find that out?
He found that out after his first U.S. Open.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually, Jeff Cook, our tour rep, told him, he's like, hey, just so you know, do you have any idea that these clubs were designed for you? And he just, I think in typical Brooks fashion, I think his reaction was, cool. And like, that was it. But the fact that he played it and found them out, it shows that, first off, that we kind of know what we're doing in terms of design side, but not just the aesthetic, but also the performance side. But then he played those, and he won, I guess it was 2 U.S. Opens and then a PGA, and then he went right into the new irons after that. And again, with Brooks, he can play whatever he wants. So we're just hoping he likes the next iteration we have coming. He liked everything we did with the 919 Tour, so it went right into the bag as well. So we're very, very, very fortunate that that's worked out. He's an incredible player, and we're just lucky to have our name riding his coattails. So.
That's cool.
That's really, do you guys just basically support him with the irons on tour, like in terms of the tour truck and stuff like that? It's not like he's he's not a staff player, obviously, but you're just supporting his.
If he
wants
whatever he wants, what he gets. So that's pretty much how it works.
It's cool that you designed all that before he had won all the U.S. Opens and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's great that it worked out, but obviously it could have, maybe he didn't have that career. The whole thing would be a different story.
There's no telling, and it's really cool just because as a club designer, and just to bring it all full circle to your first question. When I was growing up, again, huge Tiger fan. Like my high school quote at the end was like "Hello World." Like I wanted to be like Tiger Woods, and going into golf club design, my goal was always to how can I work with Tiger? How can I work with Tiger? So that was always one of the things that that's that star you're going after. Eventually, then Tiger kind of fell off and had his hard times for a while, and I was working with Luke Donald at the time, and I got to work with Luke being the #1 player in the world. And that was really cool because I got to say, well, okay, I didn't get to work with Tiger, but I got to work with the #1 player on the planet, playing a golf club I worked on. Super cool to be a part of that. I had never won a major until one of my clubs had never won a major until Brooks. So then that almost brings it full circle again of like, okay, cool. So now I literally in my basement I have a picture of Brooks with an iron signed. So it's cool as a little thing, little one of a kind souvenir to have up in your basement.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
No, it's awesome. Well, we really appreciate you joining us. I mean, we were very fortunate, to get to come in and do the overview of the product, but to get the little bonus of getting you on the podcast is huge as well.
So everyone will see videos about the woods coming in about a month's time. Is that right? Just over a month's time?
Yeah, that's about right.
Once we get down to Orlando, pretty much around that time.
Yep.
And it's quite amazing we're there again.
I can't believe it's that soon.
It's just about a month away. I know, especially for you.
I know.
Here we go.
It really is. I mean, I think about it always. We get to sort of October, November, and think, okay, it's nice, bit of downtime. It's a real sprint. We can maybe catch our breath for a second. Not a bit of it.
Not much.
You're planning for it starting all over again, and often the planning is more hectic than actually the hustle and bustle of the season.
So true.
I know. No, it's cool. Looking forward to it.
But thank you for the time. I always love speaking with you guys. Whenever I can do it more, let's do it.
Absolutely. More to come for sure, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you in Orlando.
For sure.
Excellent. Okay.